You ever have one of those moments where you ask yourself, am I the crazy one? Or is the world actually this ridiculous? Because that's exactly where I found myself the day my HOA, an HOA that I pay every single month, decided to fine me for something I was legally allowed to do on my own property. Let me rewind this story a little because trust me, you're going to want all the details. It was early fall. The air was crisp, the leaves were just starting to change, and for the first time in months, I finally had a free weekend. So what did I want to do? Something simple, something peaceful, something I've done since I was a kid growing up in the countryside. Hunting. Nothing dramatic, nothing illegal, just me, my gear, and the small wooded area behind my house that sits fully on my parcel of land. I'd hunted there before. My neighbors hunted there before. The HOA had never said a word about it. But this time, this time they were ready. I'm walking back home after a quiet morning. No noise, no drama, nothing even taken. The sun's coming up, the birds are chirping, and I'm actually in a pretty good mood. Then I see it taped to my front door like some kind of eviction notice, bright orange, aggressive font, practically screaming at me. Notice of HOA violation. I thought it was a joke. Seriously, I looked around expecting hidden cameras or something, but nope, it was real. And the violation? Engaging in hunting activities that disrupt the peace and violate community guidelines. Disrupt the peace? There wasn't even a sound. Violating guidelines? What guidelines? Hunting wasn't even mentioned in the community handbook. Not once. I checked. But nope. They slapped me with a $750 fine like they were handing out parking tickets. I marched myself straight to the HOA office. And let me tell you, if you've ever dealt with HOA board members, you know exactly the vibe I walked into. That mix of forced politeness and pure smugness, like they enjoy every second of lecturing adults about garbage cans and paint colors. So I explained, calmly, patiently. I showed maps proving the land was mine. I quoted our own HOA handbook back to them. And do you know what the president said? She crossed her arms, leaned back in her chair, and with that perfect HOA Karen tone, she said, "Whether or not the land is yours, your activity makes the community uncomfortable. We have the authority to take action when residents feel unsafe. Maybe you should find a new hobby." A new hobby. A new hobby? At that moment, something inside me snapped. Not anger, not rage, just clarity. That cold, calm feeling when you realize someone has pushed you 1 inch too far. Because here's the thing. Our HOA has one special treasure they're very proud of, a big selling point for the neighborhood. A private hiking trail. Not owned by the HOA, not owned by the community. No, it ran entirely through privately owned land that the previous owner had allowed the HOA to use for free as long as the trails were maintained. And guess what? That land was listed for sale, had been for months, and apparently nobody else was interested in buying a huge chunk of forest with no real development potential. Except me. The moment that HOA president told me to find a new hobby, I had a new mission instead. Find the listing, buy the land, and remind them that property rights still matter. Call it petty, call it revenge, call it whatever you want. But when someone tries to bully you using rules that don't exist on land that isn't theirs with authority they absolutely do not have, you bet I'm going to respond. Not with yelling, not with threats, not with arguments, but with ownership papers. Within 48 hours, I had made the phone call. Within a week, I had walked the land with the realtor, and within a month, the sale was complete. The land the HOA used for their beautiful, peaceful, beloved hiking trail was now mine. All 62 acres of it. They had no idea, not yet, but I knew the moment would come, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. The day I closed on the land felt almost surreal. 62 acres of dense woods, open clearings, and winding trails, all mine. I didn't buy it to build on. I didn't buy it to flip. I bought it for one reason. Because my HOA thought they could bully me. And now I finally had the leverage to show them that their power stops where my property line begins. But I didn't tell them right away. No, that would have ruined the fun. I waited. I waited until the next Community Nature Walk Day, the one event the HOA bragged about nonstop. It was their pride and joy, the one activity they used to show how connected to nature the community was. Families would go out, kids would take photos, the HOA would post pictures online like they were running some kind of luxury wildlife retreat. So picture this. It's a bright Saturday morning. Dozens of people, moms, dads, kids, dogs, are standing by the trail entrance with their little backpacks and water bottles. HOA board members are wearing matching shirts. Everyone's excited. And right at 9 a.m., I pull up in my truck. Now, I'm not confrontational by nature, but that day, I felt a sense of calm confidence I hadn't felt in months. I stepped out, walked around to the back of my truck, and lifted out a stack of brand new signs. Bold letters, clear message. Private property, no trespassing, trail closed, authorized access only. I carried them past the HOA president. She didn't even look at me, just assumed I was some volunteer helping with setup. Then I walked straight to the entrance of the trail, dug the first sign into the ground, and stepped back to admire it. Silence. The kind of silence where every whisper stops, every footstep freezes, and every pair of eyes shifts to you at the same time. Finally, the HOA president broke through the crowd and practically barked. "What do you think you're doing?" I turned slowly, calm, respectful, even polite, and said, "Closing my property." The look on her face was priceless. A mix of confusion, anger, and dawning realization all at once. She laughed. Actually laughed. "Your property? This trail is part of the community." I pulled out a neatly folded document, the deed, and handed it to her. She scanned it. Then she scanned it again. Her face drained of color like someone had unplugged her. "You bought it?" "Yep." "All of it?" "Every acre." Her hand started to shake, just slightly. Not rage, panic. Because the truth was simple. Without the trail, the HOA had nothing. They marketed the community as nature integrated, trail access living, outdoor lifestyle homes. They used that trail to justify higher HOA fees and attract buyers. Without it, their whole branding collapsed. Parents started murmuring. "What does this mean? Is the trail closed for good? This can't be real." The HOA president tried to recover her composure. She straightened her blouse, lifted her chin, and said, "You can't just close a community trail like this." I looked her dead in the eye and said, "It's not a community trail. It's private land. My land. And the agreement allowing the HOA access expired when the previous owner sold. I'm simply enforcing my property rights, the same ones you lectured me about." You could almost hear the gears grinding in her head when she tried to spin this into something she could control. "Let's discuss this privately," she said, jaw clenched. "No problem. But the trail stays closed." I finished installing all 6 signs while she stood there fuming. Parents began turning around, disappointed. Some even muttered that the HOA should have known better. A few even took pictures of the signs, probably preparing for the next community gossip wave. When the crowd finally dispersed and the HOA president approached me alone, she said, "You're doing this out of spite." I shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe it's about respect. You fined me for hunting on my land.
You told me to find a new hobby. So I did. Land acquisition. She hated that answer. Absolutely hated it. We can compensate you, she said finally, like she was making some grand diplomatic offer. I smiled. I'm listening. We can offer a reasonable yearly payment for trail access. I nodded slowly. How much? Her number? An insult. A joke. Barely enough to cover trail maintenance, let alone acknowledge the value of 62 acres. So, I gave her my answer. The trail stays closed. She looked like she swallowed a lemon whole. Anger, humiliation, frustration. All because the HOA tried to flex its power where it didn't belong. But she wasn't done yet. I could tell from the fire in her eyes she was preparing a counterattack. She stormed off with the deed still in her hand, muttering something about legal counsel. Oh, she was gonna fight.
If you've ever dealt with an HOA before, you already know one thing. They hate losing power. They cannot stand the idea that someone outsmarted them, especially when that someone is a homeowner they tried to push around. So it didn't surprise me one bit when 3 days after closing the trail, I received a thick envelope in the mail. Heavy paper. Official-looking stamp, the kind of envelope meant to intimidate you before you even open it. Inside, a letter from the HOA's attorney. And let me tell you, it was the most dramatic, over-the-top piece of legal fiction I've ever read. According to them, I had violated community harmony, disrupted shared neighborhood amenities, caused emotional distress, and my personal favorite, acted with malicious intent aimed at destabilizing HOA cohesion. Destabilizing HOA cohesion. I nearly laughed myself out of my chair. And at the bottom was their demand. Reopen the trail immediately or face escalating legal action. But here's the thing. Unlike the HOA, I actually do my research before making big moves. I already knew, 100%, they had no legal standing. No easement, no agreement, no contract, not even a rite of passage. Nothing. So I drafted a response. Not angry, not emotional, just factual, calm, and brutally clear. This land is private. I hold the deed. There is no easement or contract granting HOA access. Any future unauthorized entry by residents will be treated as trespassing. The trail will remain closed. 2 days later, the HOA president herself showed up at my door. No knock, no doorbell, just aggressive banging until I opened because she wanted an audience, not a conversation. The moment I cracked the door, she shoved her way halfway inside and snapped, "You're destroying this community!" I stepped outside, closing the door behind me so she couldn't barge in any farther, and said, "Actually, I'm protecting my property. That's what you always tell us to do, right? Follow the rules?" She wasn't listening. She was too busy spinning her own story. "This neighborhood depends on that trail. Families use it. Buyers expect it. You're tanking home values." I folded my arms. Maybe the HOA should have thought about its precious trail before they find the person who now owns it. Her jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might snap. "We're taking this to court," she hissed. I shrugged. "Go ahead." Because here's the truth. HOAs threaten lawsuits constantly, but actually filing one, that costs money. And losing one, that costs even more. Still, she was too furious to walk away quietly. Over the next week, the HOA launched what I can only describe as a full-blown harassment campaign. First, they sent me 3 more violation notices. Improper placement of trash cans. They were exactly where they always were. Yard not in compliance. My lawn was trimmed, edged, perfect. Unsightly outdoor equipment visible from the street. They meant my garden hose. It was pathetic. Then they escalated. Board members began driving by slowly, phones out, recording my property like they were private investigators. Neighbors, previously friendly, started acting cold, clearly fed the HOA's exaggerated version of events. One even said to me, "Why would you do this to all of us? We didn't fine you." I told him, "Then maybe your HOA shouldn't act like a dictatorship." Word spread fast. And that's when something interesting happened. People started choosing sides. Not everyone was blindly loyal to the HOA. Some residents quietly approached me during evening walks or while I was in the yard. One older man said, "Son, I've lived here since this place was built. The HOA has been abusing power for years. What you did, honestly, good." A single mom told me, "They fined me $100 because my kid left a bicycle on the driveway for 10 minutes. I hope they learned their lesson this time." But the tension kept growing. Finally, the HOA made their big move. They called for an emergency community meeting. They printed flyers, sent emails, made announcements. Mandatory attendance recommended, which in HOA language means show up or we'll guilt you for the next 3 months. I showed up too. Of course they did, because if they wanted a showdown, this was the moment. When I walked into that clubhouse, every head turned. Some glared, others nodded in support. The HOA president stood at the front, arms crossed, radiating fury. She opened the meeting with a speech dripping with drama. She talked about community values, about shared outdoor spaces, about dangerous behaviors from certain residents, about loss of unity. Everything except the truth. Then she pointed directly at me and said, "This homeowner has taken something from us all, something sacred to our community, and we must find a way to restore what was taken." I raised my hand. She ignored me. I raised it again. Still ignored. That's when I stood up, walked straight to the front, and said, "You didn't lose the trail. You never owned it." The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, some cheers, a couple of groans. And that moment, that confrontation, was only the beginning.
The room didn't just go silent. It froze. You could feel the tension crackle like electricity. Half the people stared at me. The other half stared at the HOA board like they were waiting for an explosion. The HOA president tried to regain control by slamming her clipboard onto the table. "This homeowner," she said, practically spitting the words, "is attempting to weaponize a loophole to hurt this community." I raised an eyebrow. "A loophole? You mean private property? That thing our laws treat as kind of important?" A few people chuckled. The president did not. She puffed herself up and said, "We have consulted with our attorney. We are prepared to file an injunction if you do not reopen the trail immediately." Ah, yes, the big, scary word, injunction. She said it like she expected me to faint. Instead, I pulled a folder from my bag and laid it on the table in front of her. Inside? A full legal analysis from a real property attorney, one I had hired the moment the HOA sent their first threat. She flipped through the papers, her eyes narrowing deeper with every line. I cleared my throat. "Page 2, I said calmly. "That's the section where the attorney explains, in simple terms, that the HOA has zero legal claim, no easement, no contract, no historical use rights, nothing." Her fingers tightened around the paper. "And page 4, I added, explains that if the HOA files an injunction without standing, it will be dismissed and you could be liable for my attorney fees." That one hit her hard. Because everyone in that room knew one thing. The HOA board was already infamous for wasting money on pointless investigations, consultations, and enforcement actions.
Their budget wasn't exactly overflowing. One resident in the back, a guy who always showed up to meetings just to watch the drama, shouted, "Is this true? Did you people not check whether we even had rights to the trail?" The HOA glared at him. "This is not a debate. Please allow the board to address." But someone else cut her off. "You should have checked before you built a whole community around land you don't own." Another voice chimed in. "We pay high HOA fees for amenities you don't even control." Then a woman stood up, holding the violation letter the HOA had sent her last month. "And you're wasting time going after people for their lawns while ignoring actual issues." The room broke into chaos. Shouting, questions, frustration. Years of pent-up anger at the HOA's nonsense finally boiled over. The HOA president tried to drown it out. She banged her gavel, which, by the way, no one had actually seen her use before, and screamed, "Order! Order! Order!" But nobody listened. So I raised my hand and waited. Within seconds, the room quieted enough for me to speak. "Look," I said, calm as ever, "I didn't buy that land to hurt the community. I bought it because the HOA tried to punish me for using my own property. They overstepped, badly. So I took away the thing they were using as leverage." I paused. "And I'm not reopening the trail." Immediately, the president jumped in. "You can't do that!" I'd already did. She was trembling, not with fear, but with humiliation. I continued. "You want to sue me? Go ahead. My attorney already prepared a response. But let me warn you, if you spend HOA funds on a lawsuit you know you can't win, the homeowners will have every right to vote you out for misappropriation of community money." Several heads nodded. People whispered. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Then an older resident stood up, Mr. Langford, one of the neighborhood's originals. A quiet man, usually harmless but respected. He pointed straight at the HOA board and said, "You did this, not him. You pushed a homeowner too far, and he pushed back. That's not on him, that's on you." Boom. That was the moment everything changed. The HOA president's face twisted like she swallowed a wasp. But she could no longer hide behind fake authority. The room wasn't with her anymore. People demanded transparency. They wanted to know why the board didn't look into land rights, why they used HOA resources to harass a homeowner, why they were threatening lawsuits over something they didn't own. The board members looked trapped, shifting in their chairs, avoiding eye contact. They finally realized they weren't dealing with the passive neighborhood they were used to. The president finally said, "We will take a brief recess." She and the board hurried into a back room, slamming the door behind them. The moment they were gone, the room erupted. People rushed over to me, some supportive, some concerned, some curious. The general vibe? The HOA messed up. Badly. We waited almost 20 minutes before the board returned. When they did, the president looked defeated. Her shoulders slumped, her voice flat. She cleared her throat and said, "After reviewing the legal documentation, the board has decided not to pursue legal action at this time." Translation, they knew they would lose. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We will explore alternate community events that do not rely on the trail." Translation, they were panicking. But the best part? When one resident asked, "Will the HOA issue an apology?" she said, "We have nothing to apologize for." Oh, she still had her pride. For now. She dismissed the meeting abruptly and nearly sprinted out the door. But the consequences of that night? Those were just beginning.
After that meeting, the HOA board walked out thinking they had dodged a bullet. No lawsuit, no direct confrontation, no immediate consequences. But what they didn't realize was that the entire neighborhood had just seen behind the curtain. And the illusion of authority? Shattered. For years, the HOA relied on fear, confusion, and those passive, I don't want trouble homeowners. They thrived on people being too busy to fight back or too tired to argue. But the moment the HOA board exposed how sloppy, arrogant, and reckless they were, everything changed. The neighborhood awakens. The very next day, something incredible happened. People started knocking on my door, not to complain, not to argue, but to talk. Is it true they used money for this without approval? Did they really threaten you like that? Can they even fine us for half the stuff they claim they can? I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told them the truth. And once the truth spread, the neighborhood began to split, not into drama or chaos, but into action. Someone started a group chat. Another neighbor started digging through old HOA financial reports. A few retired residents began reading the official bylaws page by page, like detectives. And the more they discovered, the angrier they became. The HOA had been charging maintenance fees for areas that didn't exist. They'd been enforcing rules not listed in any official document. They'd issued fines that weren't legally enforceable. And worst of all, they had been advertising the hiking trail as a community feature despite knowing they didn't own the land. This wasn't just incompetence. It was deception. The petition appeared. About a week later, a neighbor I barely knew, a quiet school teacher named Andrea, showed up on my porch holding a clipboard. "I think it's time for new leadership," she said. On the clipboard, a petition to call a special election to remove the HOA president and the majority of the board. She only needed signatures from 25% of homeowners. She already had 40%. I signed immediately. Within 2 days, she had 70%. Within a week, she had the majority of the entire community. The board couldn't ignore it. According to our bylaws, they were legally required to hold a vote. And oh, did the neighborhood show up. Packed room, standing space only. People who hadn't attended an HOA meeting in 10 years were suddenly sitting front row. The vote that ended everything. The HOA president tried to save face with a dramatic speech. She tried blaming me, blaming misinformation, blaming ungrateful homeowners who don't appreciate order. But no one bought it anymore. When it came time to vote, the ballots were counted in the clubhouse kitchen. It took less than 20 minutes. When the results were read, the room broke into applause. She was removed. So were 2 board members. A third resigned on the spot, just to avoid the embarrassment. A brand new board was elected the same night. People the community actually respected. Andrea became president, and the very first thing she did, she walked up to me, shook my hand, and said, "On behalf of everyone here, thank you for standing up to them." It felt strange, honestly. I hadn't done it to be a hero. I'd done it because I was tired of being pushed around. But the people around me weren't praising revenge. They were relieved, grateful, free. The HOA apologizes, finally. 2 days after the new board took over, I received an official letter. A real apology. No excuses, no passive-aggressive lines. Just a simple acknowledgement that the previous board had acted improperly, unfairly, and outside the boundaries of their authority. They also attached a statement clearing all previous violations against me, including the absurd hunting fine. But the best part? In that same letter, they asked, very politely, if I would consider reopening the hiking trail. And you know what? I thought long and hard about it. Not out of spite, but on principle. The new board had shown respect, accountability, humility, something I never expected from an HOA. So, I offered a deal. Not money, not favors, something simpler. I would reopen the trail under one condition. The HOA must formally acknowledge in writing that the trail is not and will never be community property, and that access can be revoked at any time if the HOA returns to abusive behavior. They agreed immediately. So I reopened half the trail, left the other half private, just for me. Not out of pettiness, but to make sure they never forgot the lesson. Respect homeowners, respect property, respect boundaries, or lose privileges completely. The final irony. Months later, I overheard a neighbor telling a new resident the story of the legendary trail incident, and she finished with, "He didn't destroy the community. He saved it." And that, funny enough, was never my intention. I just wanted fairness. And in the end, the very people who tried to crush me ended up being the reason their entire power structure collapsed. Because when an HOA tries to bully the wrong homeowner, sometimes the homeowner fights back. Sometimes he exposes them. And sometimes he buys the land under their feet and reminds them exactly who they're dealing with.